Too late.
No, it's fun. It's fun.
Especially live stream.
Mute. Paul, just to clarify, there's a couple of us in the committee room 1. Can they hear us? Can you? You're on mute.
No, we can hear you in the room.
Yeah. Just to confirm.
Oh yes.
Okay, we're now live on YouTube. I'm just warning you.
Okay. All right. Thanks, Georgina. Well, in that case, I'm very happy to start this illustrious meeting of the Landlord Services Advisory Board. Welcome, everybody. Welcome, Gillian. Thank you for coming back. Well done.
Yeah.
Let's start with item 1 on our agenda then. Apologies for absence. Georgina, have we got any? Georgina, sorry.
Georgina, can you hear us?
Yes.
Oh yeah, sorry. Apologies for absence, Georgina.
The only apology I've had is from Officer Annie Wrighton. Okay.
All right. Fine. Thank you very much. And then moving on then to minutes of our previous meeting. Anybody? Oh, Terry, you've got your hand up.
Yes.
Yeah, just to say that
I can hear you.
Thank you. Just to say that I spoke to Danielle not 30 minutes ago. She will be with us, but
Okay.
she's got to arrange the children.
Right. Excellent. Okay. Thanks, Terry. Okay. So item 2 on our agenda then, minutes of the previous meeting that was held on the 28th of January. Does anybody have any comments on the meeting before I ask if you agree it? Good. So members, do we all agree the minutes of the meeting held on the 28th of January?
Agreed.
Thank you. Perfect. Okay. Lovely. And then item 3, declarations of interest. Georgina, any declarations of interest? Any declarations of interest? No?
There's no declarations of interest.
Thank you. Right. Just one point that, just throwing everything around here. One point that I'd like to raise just at this stage in terms of our organization. On the agenda, you'll see that Nick Palmer is no longer joint chairman of this, or at least he's been removed because he finds it very difficult to get here. And Terry, who's our vice chairman, means that we really adopt a standard form for this meeting with 1 chairman and 1 vice chairman. But what I want to do with our 10 annual meetings as we go forward is to swap chair notionally between me and Terry. So this time I'll chair it. Next time Terry will chair the meeting, and we'll just work on that way forward. Okay, so item 4 then, senior living consultation is to swap chair notionally between me and Terry. So sorry, I missed that. I didn't hear.
I think that was an echo through Georgina's regard, and I think it was just
okay.
So you can probably carry on.
I thought I heard the dulcet tones of my own voice coming through, which was a bit scary. Okay, so moving on then to item 4, senior living consultation. Annalisa, yes, perfect. Lots of exciting pictures. Over to you.
Sorry, bear with me. Okay, I think I'm off mute and I've shared pictures, so
Yes,
I'm
we can
pleased.
hear you. Yes, I can see the screen.
Okay, that's lovely. So I wanted to talk to you about the senior living consultation. You'll have had the papers through, so we've got the report and a number of annexes. So I'm hoping everybody's had an opportunity to read through the information. So I will give you an overview, and then we'll open the floor for discussion. So just to give you a little bit of background that was in the report, we have 8 senior living schemes in Waverley, and back in 2018, sorry, I've not got my papers in front of me. There's been a change in the funding arrangements. So we used to get funding from Surrey County Council for housing support, and that enabled us to have full-time senior living officers on site. Tenants panel were involved in consultation exercises with senior living when that was withdrawn. And so we've had a change in the focus since 2008 with moving from sheltered housing to senior living scheme, and really making the scheme's more independent. It's independent living for people, and Waverley would not provide any support. We can signpost and empower people to get support, but that's not our main purpose. That's not what we're delivering. And the focus was for tenants to manage their own social activities within the schemes, and there's a change in the role for the senior living officer, with a real focus on the buildings and the health and safety, and then, as I said, empowering and enabling people to live independent lives. We were just at the beginning of that journey when the pandemic hit in 2020 and we had lockdown, and all our aspirations and plans for the senior living schemes had to be put on hold because we weren't able to go out, we had to work from home, and people weren't able to meet, as I'm sure you're all aware and remember. So just looking, so when we had the change with the from sheltered housing to senior living, we had an undertaking that we would consult with residents every year to see how the changes were going, and to get feedback. So this happened in 2019, but then because of the pandemic, it didn't happen in 2020, and we were unable to hold face-to-face meetings in 2021 either. So we did a paper survey, and these are the results that I can share with you now. So overall, we had a generally positive response to the services that people received in senior living, but we are concerned about the satisfactory, poor and very poor. We need to unpick that a bit further to see what the issues are within each scheme. Overall, we had about a 30% response rate, which is generally deemed okay and statistically viable, but what you'll notice is that we had very variable response rates between different schemes. So you can see at Moat Lodge, 75% of residents there completed the survey, but at Faulkner Courts, only 10% responded to the survey, and actually those surveys were hand delivered to the boroughs as well. They didn't come in a different way. So I think we want to investigate the response rate and to make sure we've got a good view across all the different schemes. We gave people the opportunity to have free text about what they thought needed improving in the senior living schemes. And something that came out a lot was more staff presence. And we need to unpick that. Was that because of the pandemic, where we did have people going into the schemes but not at the same regularity, or is that back to the fact that people expected a 24/7 staff presence in the schemes, which is not something we can afford to deliver, or is something that we're looking to do? But equally within that, you can see that we've got some comments about bathrooms, general maintenance and cleaning. We've also nicely got nothing needs improving, but you'll have seen all that information through the report in the annexes. Moving on to the communal areas, I was quite surprised to see such a positive response about this, given the fact that the communal areas have not been able to be used for the last 2 years. And I think this is something we want to develop further with our residents to make sure that the communal spaces are being used, and making sure that they're places people want to be, and they do see them as an extension of their own living accommodation. We specifically asked a question about the pandemic. The tenants panel were very involved in the creation of the survey and gave some very helpful feedback about what we should be asking. And again, interesting, we had some positive responses from residents about how our response had been. We were obviously telling the same messages that national government was saying, you know, stay inside, don't socialise, which were very hard messages for people. And, you know, housing people are all about people and talking, getting together. So it was a very difficult period of time for everybody. So taking account of all the results, we've pulled together a draft action plan that I'd really like the board to discuss and have your feedback on. As with anything, and as you've seen from our service plan this year, communications are key. We really need to make sure we've got clear communications and we're setting clear expectations, and us as a landlord and tenants are receiving the service they expect. And if it's something we can't deliver, we need to give clear messages about that and what residents can expect from us. Within the action plan, I've also identified that we need to do a bit of analysis about the response rate. As I mentioned, why did one scheme respond so comprehensively and others not at all? We want to do some more work about the communal areas. There were questions about the decoration of them. We've got a plan. We know when schemes are due to be redecorated or furniture replaced. So we need to make sure that we've got some clarity about that and that information is shared with residents. I was also concerned that there was a question about the accessibility of some of the communal areas. And again, so we've created a draft action plan to do some accessibility studies. Residents also raised improvements that they would like to see or things that they've been waiting for. So there was some suggestions about spy holes, and we need to follow up about services that we'd had in place, such as Wi-Fi and Sky TV. The senior living manager is also going to go through all the responses and pick up individual issues in different schemes or for different residents. I've mentioned EDI, that's equality, diversity and inclusion. So we want to do some accessibility studies to make sure the homes are suitable for people, but also to look for any other ways that we can promote equality, diversity and inclusion in the schemes and to support residents. And then overall, we need to look at the promotion of the schemes. People who live in senior living are generally, I'm sure we've got people on the call who can comment on this, are generally very happy with their flats and where they live. And we've always had an issue of trying to support people to downsize. And if we can promote the schemes in a much better way and let people know that it's not a care home, it's not sheltered housing, it is independent living where you can get some support if necessary. And I think that would be a good way forward for us to ensure the future of the schemes. So my suggested discussion points are, I'm happy to take questions and any clarifications you've had from all the papers you've received. And then these are some of the key areas that I thought we could have discussions about, but I'm happy to hand back over to the chair.
Councillor Palmer has his hand raised, Annalisa.
And Paul Rivers is on mute. I think you're talking, but I can't hear you.
How did that happen? Sorry, I was just chatting away to myself. Okay, thanks, Annalisa, for that. That's very, very clear. And I'd certainly refer everybody to Annex 3 where the action plan is. Nick, you've got your hand up.
Yes, just a general point that in this kind of survey, there will be an automatic bias to the people who are most active, feel most engaged, and there is a systematic risk that people who feel particularly frail and vulnerable and lonely don't respond as much as everybody else. So to some extent, I think the point that Annalise has highlighted, that the response rate varied, should be followed up with personal conversations with some of the residents who didn't respond, to try to find out whether they have a slightly different view.
Yeah, okay, that's very true. I'm sure that Annalise has got that in hand. And I guess the other point is that I don't think we could afford to put a £5 note on the back of every every question sheet once they're returned. But no, Annalise, you'll be looking at what Nick says, I guess, yes?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think, and the thing is with senior living, we do have a wide variety of people living in the schemes. I remember meeting a lovely couple of residents, and they were actually son and daughter living independently in a scheme. You know, the mum was in her 80s and the son was in his 60s. So, and everybody's got a different perception of age and what they want for their future.
Sure. One question from me, just very briefly. We're going to be doing this sort of thing every year. Next year, how will you plan to do the survey? Will you use the same sort of process, or will it be through meetings and discussions?
Yeah, so this is the first time we've done it as a paper survey, and that's because we were unable to do consultation events in person. So David Brown, the senior living manager, does prefer to do the consultations in person. However, I think looking forward for next year, we will probably do a mix of responses. So have those open meetings for people to discuss and talk to us, but also give people the opportunity to provide information privately through the paper survey as well.
Okay, all right. Morning, Danielle. Okay, you're muted, but go ahead.
Hi.
I have to shout.
Oh, am I too loud? Do I need to turn it down?
No, that's fine.
And what will you do, Annalise? Because I think that it's not a full survey. It's just no good. I sent an email, I think, as you saw this morning.
Yeah.
And to echo what Nick said, clearly the tenants that are most best supported are the ones that have responded. So although you say that there's been a 30% response, I don't actually think that there's been a proportional 30% response. You know, you could say that those 75% of Moat Lodge that may well be the best supported tenants have had the biggest say. So I feel like this is an incomplete survey and it needs to be finished off, really.
Yeah, so I mean, the first action point is to investigate why Faulkner Court had such poor response rates. I think generally 30% is deemed a fair response rate, but given the nature of the schemes and the fact, you know, we want to investigate, and I think each scheme potentially handed out the surveys in a different way.
Well, it does say that they were offered support with completing the form.
Yeah.
But is that actually true? Because I believe that in one scheme, they were just put in a pile near maybe Terry can remind me, were they just put in a pile near the doorway? That's not a satisfactory survey. And what you taught us, Annalise, in a previous meeting is how we get very different responses depending on how a survey is carried out.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think
Annalisa, Councillor Keane wants to come in now. Sorry, Paul, we haven't got any hands up facilities in the committee room. Apologies.
Oh, right. Okay.
Councillor,
my apologies. I wasn't looking at you. Okay.
Councillor Keane wants to come in.
Yeah.
Yes, please.
Thank you, Paul. Can you hear me all right?
Yes, I can.
You know, I think one of the problems that I'd like to say that I think it was a very good questionnaire, and well done, Annalise. But I think one of the things we've got to be mindful of is the fact that we're coming out of COVID, and the elderly were almost confined for, let's say, 18 months, almost 2 years. They didn't see anybody, they didn't speak to very many people, especially if they were on their own or their family were far away. And it has impacted immensely on their mental health and well-being. And I know this for a fact because I actually have a friend that is in independent living. Her mental agility has completely gone. All conversations are on a loop, and I have to remind her about every 2 minutes of what she's doing tomorrow. So, you know, this questionnaire possibly came at a very difficult time for older people to understand and take in. And I think maybe the Faulkner Court one, you may have had residents there that were much older, maybe less able-bodied, and maybe couldn't be bothered to fill something in. So I don't think it's the fault of the questionnaire. I think it is the timing of it to coincide with COVID. Can't be helped, but I think it's lessons learned that we can move on from. And the people that have filled the questionnaire in, obviously, and Daniel is probably quite right there, that they are the ones that are very active, very mentally agile, and they want to be involved, but the others maybe not quite so. And I think it's something that could be addressed.
The problem is, I'm sorry to come in there, but there is a failing in how the survey was delivered, because in different schemes, they were delivered in very different ways. And I believe that in some schemes, they were popped under the door, and in other schemes, they were put in just in the foyer for people to collect. You know, that's not acceptable.
Okay, Danielle, I think we do take that point, and I think what we're hearing is that there is a fair amount of follow-up work to, you know, that this action plan is not fixed. We're going to be reviewing that as we go forward. I've got two people. I've got Terry and then Simon. Terry.
Terry, you're muted.
Terry, you're muted. Okay. I have Simon. Simon, you've got a hand up. Or Terry, you're still muted. You took your hand down.
While you're waiting for Terry, the question I've got is that you've highlighted a 75% return at Moat Lodge. I think that was due to the fact that they have a very good on-site manager that promotes all this sort of thing better than in other schemes. I think that needs to be looked at. And I agree very much with Daniela. I don't think this survey gives a true representation of what people think of senior living.
Thanks, Simon. I guess what we've already said is that it wasn't an ideal situation. It was one we were stuck with because of COVID. But we've learned, I guess officers have, if they didn't already realize that, I'm sure that taking it forward, there will be a bit more investigation in this. And next year, it'll be done much more face-to-face. Terry, you've got your hand up.
Yes, thank you. I fully support what Danielle and Simon have said, and has been a concern of the tenant panel for some time that it's not all well in some of these schemes, and how you can have such a variance with one site responding 75% and somewhere else, which is supposed to be under the same management, responding by 10%. And there are many reasons that were mentioned earlier about how that happens. But I think the thing is that to say that next year we'll put it right is possibly too late. You know, we should be looking at what we've done. Was the survey viable? Is it viable? Is it, you know, is it representative of all the tenants and as many tenants as we can? And I have to also point out that when we helped the senior living manager to set up this questionnaire, it was really from some force from us to say that there's going to be we couldn't have the face-to-face, but there didn't seem to be any urgency at all in doing the survey, and although we support it, you know, it was more of a case of trying to get it done and get it out there. But I think the whole outcome of it and the report that's there is not really, I think, a mirror of what's going on, and there needs to be a more urgent review of what's happening in the schemes than saying that next year we'll make it better.
Yeah, thanks, Terry. I'm assuming that really the initial response on the Faulkner Court area is part of the action to find out what went on. But I'm sure Annalisa would say that would be across the board. Annalisa,
yeah, absolutely. We can scale that up. I mean, what I would say is that, you know, no survey is perfect, and you know, I'm not saying these are the results, aren't they great, we're not going to do anything about it. We're saying these are the results, there's some positives, but we've also identified a lot of issues, and issues that the tenants panel have raised in the past. And so the action plan is to pick up those issues, and for us to progress things. And as we said, you know, one of the ones is about communication and two-way communication. So it could be that now restrictions have lifted, we can now go back into some of the schemes, particularly where we had a low response rate, and speak to people face to face and get some more information to help us improve the service.
Thanks, Annalisa. I'm not seeing any hands up. Any more comments before we move on to the...
Paul, it's Hugh in the committee room.
Oh, and Gillian too. Okay, Hugh.
Let Gillian go first.
All right, Gillian.
Thank you. As most of you know, I'm also tenants panel. I just wanted to add in a couple of things. The tenants panel were part of the production of this questionnaire, that is true, but we were not part of the decision of how to send it out, how to deal with it after it is produced. We helped with the production of it. I wanted to make that quite clear in case some of you didn't know that. And just from a personal point of view, it comes back to communication always, of course. The tenants panel were only made aware of this questionnaire a few days before the cut-off date of the 8th of December. We met the week before, and Daniel and I took it upon ourselves to go to Baring House 1, the Farncombe one, before the 8th of December, and it was actually Monday the 6th. To speak with residents there, to try and encourage them to complete their questionnaires and just to find out how they felt about everything. And it was a very, very negative response that we got from a lot of tenants. Well, I won't say a lot of tenants, but we only had time to speak to a few. But those few, it was all negative. And one person particularly, who I have known since I was a child, refused to complete it because she was afraid of repercussions. You know, I know it's supposed to be anonymous, but she felt, well, anyone can tell what I've said. And so there was a lot of fear about, a lot of unhappiness and a lot of fear, which is not good. And we were not happy about it. We wanted to go to Dower House as well, but I'm afraid we just never had the time. Thank you, Paul.
Thanks, Jill. Okay, so...
Paul?
Yeah, sorry, Hugh. Thank you very much.
I mean, I just want to respond to some of the points, but before I do that, can I introduce Rowena? She's our Easy Fleming. She's our Easy Move officer, and part of her role is try to people to downsize and hopefully move into the senior schemes. And just for her insight in terms of customers that go to view it, in terms of when we're trying to let the properties, because that is one critical thing. We've got to keep the schemes thriving, that people want to move into them, and we don't have empty properties. As we know that's critical. And she's just got some interesting observations in terms of potential customers coming into those schemes. And then perhaps, if there's no other comments, then I can perhaps just summarise what I think we need to take away, if that's okay.
Oh, yes, please, go ahead.
Rowena, just want to introduce
everyone.
yourself.
I'm Rowena, the Transfer Easy Move officer. We're trying to encourage people to downsize and encourage them to go into our senior living schemes. We've had a lot of negativity of people we've recommended to it. The main thing is their perception of what senior living is. When they visit the place, they see the sign and their perception is it's care home or it's still warden assisted. I'm not old enough for that, I'm not ready for that. Or we've got the other way where they think it is still a warden assisted, and obviously they go there and it's not right for them. It's kind of not clear for some people what it is, even though we do promote it that way. But the biggest negativity is the sign outside. We have other senior living properties that have an age restriction on them, and they don't have a big sign at the end of the road saying they're for over 60s. One tenant pointed out to us that what it screamed out to them was there could be vulnerable people living here, target us, which was a worry, because obviously they're not manned 24 hours a day, although there is the security door. The sign outside could say there's vulnerable people living here, which worried some people. So people who have gone along to the schemes, they have liked it. Then they spot the communal areas, and again, their perception is this looks like a care home. I think because of some of the furniture that's in there needs some work to be done. Or maybe we could make use of the space some other way, make the lounges a little bit smaller so they're more homely for the ones that do want to use it, rather than great big spaces that aren't being used, which is a waste. And I think because they have to arrange their own activities, many of the schemes said their lounges just aren't getting used at all. So yeah, unfortunately, it was quite negative, the response we've had. I've managed to do 8 easy moves, which is people giving up their 3-bedroom houses to move away, and not one of them has moved into senior living, unfortunately. So.
Okay, Hugh, you want to work?
So just to summarise, just thank you for everyone for their comments, and I understand where the tenants panel are talking about the survey wasn't perfect and we've got to be better. And I think it's just to emphasise this is the beginning of the conversation. I mean, we're coming out of COVID. I think the world has changed, and the schemes need to change as well. And I think that's the clear message. Change to what? I think that's the discussion. We've got to make them thriving. We've got to make them what people want to go there. They just don't go there at a crisis time part of their life. It is the whole community does come into the schemes, and I think that's what we need to set that vision for the properties. We are as we know from the budget, we are investing literally millions of pounds into the schemes to make them safe, and we've also got decoration budgets, etc. But we've got to make them take into the comments that have been said today, take the comments from the survey, take from the conversations we're going forward. We've got to basically, I think, relaunch the service again, because it is a few years ago since we relaunched it. So I think we need to reassure the board that that's what we need to do. I think the other key coming across is consistency. I think people are making the assumption, and probably a right assumption, that there's inconsistencies amongst the plots, the service that people get. And as I say, this really does stick out, is the difference between Faulkner and Moat Lodge, and what is happening there. I mean, all the Faulkner tenants who have been built, have got building site around them in terms of the Farnham project, you think they would be more, more articulate, or more issues for them, because as I say, they are basically on a building site. So I really thank everyone's comments. We will take them forward, and we will continue working with the tenants panel and tenants, and receiving I think that's the critical thing from Rowena. It's the potential customers as well. But as a business, we've got to make sure that people want to move into these schemes, and so that's the other driver as well. I think Councillor Keane wants to come in.
Can I come in here, Paul?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, please go ahead.
Yeah,
Thanks,
I think one of the problems with all these schemes is that they need modernisation, and one of the things that really comes out of all this is that somebody in their 60s now, it's what they call the now 40s. I mean, they are young people. They want.
Well, that's me and you.
Yeah,
well,
there you go.
We are that.
I'm well past that. But they see themselves as independent, older people, if you like, for a phrase. But we need to modernise the places. Take away the stigma of it being senior living, and make it welcoming. Make it a place that they see as a home. But we need to just make it more younger, for want of a better word. We need to make them look younger and more welcoming. It's very off-putting if you go into somewhere and you see a line of chairs or you see something like that. Nobody wants that. That is nursing home style or you know, something like that. We need to change that. We need to make it more acceptable to the now 60, 70 plus.
Thanks, Jackie. Danielle?
And I think the problem is that with the change of how these places were run, the emphasis seems to be more on independent living, which is absolutely right. However, when you read on the Waverley website about what can be expected from senior living, the word support is mentioned a lot. And although it is independent, support is meant to be offered. Support in encouraging communal and social activities, offering support and advice. You know, there is meant to be a very, very hands-on element of this. And I hope that we will be fed back to about what's going to be done, because clearly in some of the schemes that support is there. And sadly, in other of the schemes, it looks like the very thing that people perhaps need is not. So will we be fed back to about what you're going to do about that?
Thanks, Danielle. I've got Simon's hand up first, and then perhaps we can put it back to Hugh or Annalisa. Simon?
Yeah, I agree with Anna. Was it Annalise? Sorry, no. Daniela, what Daniela just said. Because if you read the terms that you put out, what the manager does on site, it is not followed. Everything you've put on the website of what the on-site manager will do during the course of her week here, whether she's on site or not on site, it doesn't happen. So I believe that somebody at your end needs to actually double check that things are actually happening as per what you're advertising. And if a shop was advertising in that sense, I think I would personally take them to the Ombudsman, because they're actually, it's a false statement that you've actually put on the website.
Thanks, Simon. Annalisa, let's put you back in the hotspot then. Can you ameliorate Danielle and Simon? I mean, these are good points.
Yeah, absolutely. And I replicated what was on the website in the report, so everybody's got that information. I think I'd put the slight caveat on the fact that we've had 2 years of a pandemic where we haven't been able to provide the same services as we would do. And also that those new roles were created with the removal of the supporting people fund, and we need to embed those roles. And unfortunately, because of the pandemic, that hasn't happened in the same way that we had anticipated. I don't know if Hugh wants to pick up further.
Hugh?
Yes, I think what we need to look at is a model of management that what I would call intensive housing management. And we're there ready if there's a breakdown with the tenancy, i.e. ill health.
Yeah.
And so a lot of the time it will be light touch, and we've got to be clear on that. But as soon as someone is in a critical stage in their life, i.e. ill health, the tenancy may be at risk, that's when we then actually are very intensive in terms of supporting that tenant, supporting that tenancy. And that's what we've got to develop and be able to communicate to people, or if that's what we agree that we end up with. Because there was a lot of people saying they want more staff present. But we actually got to identify what do they want for that staff present, because we could have someone there 24 hours a day doing nothing, paying them minimum wage, but they won't be able to respond to when there is a big critical thing to unravel and that's complex. So we've got to do some further work on that. I think we've got to develop the scheme. I think the key point is it's intergenerational in terms of we can have people going in at 55, 60, and we've still got people there at 100. So that's like 2 generations, isn't it? So I think that's the other thing that we've got to recognise, that I think that's what we were saying, is the different levels of service. When they come in, perhaps when they're 60s, they're young, fit, and don't need someone overlooking them. But when later in life, or when it doesn't really matter what age you are, you can still be ill at 60, and then you need that we need to step in with that support them. So that's, I think, the things that we need to develop. Chair.
Thanks, you. I've got two speakers, then Sally, and then Mr. Telling, Simon. So Sally first, please. You're muted, Sally, I'm afraid.
Have
That's
you
it.
got me now?
That's
Okay,
fine.
thank you. Well, I'm actually a very new tenant. This is why I haven't actually said an awful lot in previous meetings that I attend either, but I do say a little. But I mean, my points about the report and about the whole scene where I live is some of the tenants who've been there a while are finding it very difficult getting used to the fact that the manager is not managing the scheme anymore because their role is now classified as senior officer. Now, a previous speaker spoke about a manager. I mean, are the people, are the officers, are they still managing, or has that role been taken away from them? That's one point, if I may. But it is actually causing a lot of confusion amongst the tenants, the ones that I have actually spoken to. They, some actually bring up old issues. And I just say, listen, I'm not interested in anything before June, because when I moved in, I am very happy there. But I have had issues which have been resolved, which I'm very pleased about. But they weren't really issues. They weren't my issues. They were, it's just to do with the building. There is another issue that I won't speak about now because it's very, very sensitive. But it's just, I'm talking about the organisation, as I open the door going into what is my home, which I share with other tenants, and about what has happened there. Where I actually live actually was one of the areas where all the notification of the survey was left on the at the reception. Well, it's not a reception; it's really just a table in the reception, which looks very poor, may I add. But I saw the application, the survey. I actually filled it in, and I'd have to say at the time I was very, very happy in my dwelling, and issues are being dealt with, but they're not being dealt with the senior officer. They're actually being passed on. So I mean, we're all in a kind of a limbo. So it's very unsettling. And then, it's COVID, we can't do this because of COVID. But the majority of tenants actually feel lost without a manager.
Thank you, Sally. Terry, then, next.
Thank you. It was just really to finally, from my point of view, to say that I think what's happened is that when pulled away from managing a site to now just that they're independent leaving, for a lot of the tenants and residents, it's left a vacuum, and there's nobody there to actually pick up their issues, because a lot don't understand that they should be reporting directly for repairs that are requested, because we often meet them and they say, well, we're waiting for this, but they thought somebody else would do it and waiting for the manager or who was the manager. So I think we need to address that vacuum and how we can do that, how we can fill that for future. Thank you.
Thanks, Terry. Danielle, you have your hand up.
Yeah, sorry, last point from me. Yeah, because on what Simon mentioned about the things listed on the website, I'm not sure that they are happening. One of the things is that a staff responsibility is to arrange regular meetings to discuss issues and matters with the tenants. Now, regular, I suppose that could be annual, but I mean, how often should they be doing that? Just something like that could be much more helpful. And is it actually happening? I'm not sure that it is. You know, that level of communication ongoing, you know, maybe a drop-in, a weekly drop-in clinic or something like that. Are these things on the staff responsibilities being done in each of the schemes? And where you have a scheme like, was it Moat Lodge, the very, you know, the one with a good turnout, is that manager going to be held up as a leading example, and are you going to unpick what they're doing and trying to cascade that to the other managers?
Thanks, Danielle. Simon Telling.
Yeah, just to reiterate what Danielle's saying, I don't think that the senior living establishments actually need somebody set 5 days a week. But the point is, what do they actually do during their working time here when they're here on the 5 days? They just seem to me just to sit in the office and twiddle their thumbs. I might be wrong. I'd love to be proved to be wrong, but we never see them checking. Well, I haven't ever seen anybody here checking on the contractors to make sure the contractors are actually doing what they're meant to be doing in communal areas. I'm not talking about the flats. We all know that we are responsible for each individual unit and to report repairs, etc. There's enough notices around to say that and to remind tenants of that, but it's the public areas that Waverley are letting their residents down on, and like in the gardens and such like, are they monitoring that the lawns are being cut when they're meant to be cut, and is the standard of service that we're receiving done to a satisfactory standard? I think that's where you're letting yourselves down on, is all that sort of thing, you know, like checking emergency lighting. How else is emergency lighting that's not working being picked up on? Are you waiting for the people that are on contract to come in and service the lighting to pick up the faults? You know, it's all these sort of things that I think that these people should do or be dealing with, but they don't necessarily have to be on site 5 days a week, you know, 2 days a week or whatever. I think that's what I'm trying to get over.
Thanks, Simon. I think we've probably done enough on this one. Maybe if you would like to summarize, or Annalise would just pull it to an end. I think it's clear to me that we're at a starting position with the survey, and that we've got all of us really have got a fair amount to do. We are all eyes and ears of our tenants too, and we need to take that seriously, which of course I'm sure we do. Hugh?
Yes, I mean, it's just to repeat what you said. I think this is really the start of the conversation, to reassure people that it's not the end. We did, for so many reasons, we need to get this right for the customers, for the business, etc. We need to revamp. I mean, it is things. I'm not blaming COVID. I think this is actually, we should make COVID now an opportunity to now relaunch the service. So things haven't been done because it literally was illegal to have meetings, etc., within the schemes. So let's not make COVID the negative. Let's make it the positive in terms of actually this is now our spring forward to actually have a new senior living service, whatever we're going to call it. There's different, you know, people have got a huge amount of ideas that we can move things forward. So yes, we will mention COVID, I think, but let's mention it as a positive thing, as a springboard to actually bring further improvements. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Thanks everybody for that. So let's move on then to item 5, the flexible tenancy review. Who's going to pick up on that?
Lisa.
that old me again. You just bear with me while I try and share the screen again. I was a little technically challenged earlier. Okay, so I'll just bring up the second survey, second presentation, sorry. Okay, again, so I hope you've had an opportunity to read the information. I've tried to make it as comprehensive as possible. To give you the background, we introduced flexible tenancies back in September 2014, and this was at the time that the government were really pushing for them, and the idea that social housing should be a springboard and only available for people in housing need at the time they need it. We introduced flexible secure tenancies, which have got the same conditions of tenancies as our secure normal tenancies, lifetime tenancies, but they were fixed for 5 years only. And at the end of the 5 years, that tenancy could end without there needing to be any breach of tenancy condition. And the plan was that we would be reviewing the eligibility of tenants to social housing with the idea that we could maximise the use of our social housing. But the outcomes have been that we found that people need social housing for longer than 5 years, and having a 5-year tenancy makes people feel insecure in their home and also in their community. So they're not building the same relationships or investing in their homes and communities in the same way. There's a huge administrative burden for us to legally and properly administer flexible tenancies, and some issues have arisen since they were launched. And it's not resulted in us maximising the use of homes as was anticipated. And there's also been nationally a changing view about the use of shorter term tenancies, a real view that tenants need to have the security in their home and their community, that tenants need to be trusted and respected. And there's been a sector-wide change in the way we perceive fixed term tenancies. So the service improvement team did a review on the flexible tenancies, and the report indicates our findings and talks about the advantages and disadvantages of flexible tenancies. The officer view is that we should stop using flexible tenancies, that we do have a range of other mechanisms and a toolkit to manage tenancies and maximise the use of our homes. We've just heard from Rowena about the Easy Move scheme. But we can't just stop using flexible tenancies just like that. We'd need to go through a consultation exercise. We'd need to change our tenancy agreement, the council's tenancy policy, and the council's tenancy strategy as well. And the officer view is, while we're doing the consultation to change from a fixed term tenancy to secure tenancies, also gives us the opportunity to review our current terms of condition for our tenancy agreements. There's a few things we want to alter, as I've made a note of in the report, such as access for electric safety checks, and guidance about cesspits, and also to not use your home for Airbnb. That's a really quick overview of quite a technical issue, but I'm happy to discuss this further.
Thanks, Annalisa. I guess the key thing is cesspits don't fall in, right?
Yeah.
That's pretty straightforward. I mean, forgive me for leading this, but I think it's a no-brainer. But then I would, wouldn't I? Any comments from anybody? And maybe anything from Hugh in the room? Terry, you've got your hand up. Yes, please.
Thank you. Well, I support this. I believe that there are no benefits to tenants to have flexible short-term tenancies. It doesn't encourage the tenant to look after the property. I'm sure that if you think you're only going to be there for 5 years, you're going to spend your money or save your money for this mortgage that you'll need to get. And I just think it's counterproductive. I fully support it.
Thanks, Terry. Danielle?
Yes, likewise. I think everything in this report is really positive and yeah, seems like a step in the right direction. Seems like a good idea.
Thanks. Any further comments, Hugh?
No, it's good to the comments of the board to do support the officer's recommendation to you. As I said, there is other mechanisms to move people or support people to move when the accommodation no longer meets their need or they're over occupying those properties. As I say, we've heard from Rowena and the work that she does, and we've been able to move, as she said, she's been able to move 8 people in 6 months. So we can make that turnover that way. If we can make the senior living schemes more attractive, people would again have an incentive for them to downsize, and that, I think that's the kind of thing. I mean, when this policy was introduced, I think there was a thought that people with huge incomes were still living in their council tenancies. And what we're finding is people's circumstances every 5 years change very little. They may actually have more children and rather less children, and so it's about finding accommodation that's probably larger than smaller. So yes, thank you very much for the support, and as I say, we confirm that officers recommend to you to start the process of ending flexible tenancies.
Yeah, thanks, Hugh. Terry, last word, or is your hands up, or is that just an old hand?
Apologies, that's an old hand.
Okay, so board, we can gently move to the recommendation then, which is that the board advises the portfolio holder to end the use of flexible tenancies and support the proposal to progress the officer's implementation plan, as Hugh just said. So are we all agreed? A gentle nod of the head would do. Thanks, Simon. Thanks, everybody. Right. Moving then on to item 6, work programme. Just one little question from me, Annalisa, if I can put it to you. On page 43 of our agenda, or our working papers, there's a line, the middle one, about Q3 HRA budget monitoring report. I guess we're postponing that. Is that right?
Yes, the view is that information will come in the quarterly performance report that you'll get at the next meeting.
Yeah. So we can put March in there, right? Excellent.
Okay.
Any comments from members on the 2 things that we've done today? I guess we're being very good. Anything that we think should have been done, or in our previous meeting that hasn't? It all looks pretty straightforward to me, but then it would.
Councillor Rivers, can I just ask? Paul. I circulated the tenant satisfaction measure consultation feedback that we discussed at our previous meeting. I believe I circulated it to all the board, and it was just if you had any comments on our consultation feedback, I'd need that at the end of this meeting.
Yeah, or an hour or so afterwards.
Yeah.
Right. Okay, we've got that. Thanks, Annalisa. Oh, Terry, you still got an old hand up there. Gillian.
No, I haven't. No.
Okay, Gillian. Yes.
Paul, sorry, I've got a question. I'm not sure it's totally appropriate, but I don't know the man in blue down in committee room 1. Could somebody tell me who that is, please?
Me.
Oh, that's Andrew Smith.
Is it Andrew Smith?
Yes. Hello, Gillian. You know me.
Yeah, but I'm sorry, with my eyesight and all, I wasn't sure. I'm sorry, Andrew.
That's me. But
and you hadn't actually spoken, so I did. Thank you very much.
I was going to say something about the flexible tenancies, but thought it probably wasn't necessary. But I would have said, all I was going to say was that other housing providers are doing exactly the same if they ever started them in the first place. So this is, something very, very much that we're doing, which is good and right, and it's recognised across the sector as arguably a good idea at the time, but certainly totally impractical and has not worked. That's what I was going to say. So now I've spoken, Gillian, and I've put my Waverley blue jumper on, and I'm now waving at you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Andrew. Excellent comment. Okay, so members, we're coming to the end. Item 7, date of next meeting, which is the 31st of March at 10 o'clock in in the chamber. Terry.
Yes, sorry, could I just go back to the previous senior living? Can we have that raised at each meeting for foreseeable future, so that we can see what has gone forward and what we may need to do?
Okay, and Lisa, we can pop it on the action plan.
Yep, absolutely. We can give an update of what's happening, what the plans are. Obviously, I shared the draft action plan with you all. I'm happy to take comments about that outside of the meeting as well. If you've got some, I think we will probably extend it a bit and put in about reviewing and relaunching senior living service. And if anybody's got any, as my mum would say, whiz bang names for the future of senior living, we could have a little competition. I'm quite happy to to take that. I mean, house and homes could be really good, but I think we might need to come up with something a little bit different.
All right, everybody, thank you all very much. And what's more, the sun has just come out, so that's even better. Okay, thank you all, and see you in between.